Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream slash recording of MTG Arena. Today is Friday, December 27th. So with the exception of the new year, we are now out of having to deal with any of the any more holiday Christmas season stuff. No more purchasing per se, like maybe a little bit more on the Steam winter sale. I'll buy some more games there, but otherwise I'm well suited to stop spending money, which has been a big problem since probably 2 or 3 weeks before Black Friday up until this point. I also decided to take, well, in a funny story, I just because of my insomnia, fell asleep and hung out with people on Christmas afternoon, but did not actually open any presents or anything like that until nearly, I would say, probably 16 hours later. Basically the next day. Uh, yeah, it was the next day, if not it was late in the evening of the next day because I just fell asleep, slept for like 4 hours, and then woke up for a second, and then fell asleep again. And then on Thursday, I decided to spend the rest of the day putting together a Lego Ludo set. Ludo being Parcheesi, I believe, also is another name for it. That I then tried to modify. And I think I'm going to modify it more because I already have a Lego chess set, and storage wise it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have both take up space. The Ludo set has a kind of small amount of pieces, like less than 400, and it is a very flat board. It comes with a base plate, and then it comes with like four rigid four rigid like smaller plates that go on top of it, but then it doesn't make any room in between the base plate and those rigid plates. So unlike the chess set, it's not like there's really room to hold the minifigs that you use as characters. So it's kind of confusing, really. I don't know. They built it like you should be able to take those plates off, but then they just use flat Lego plates, which are like a 25th of an inch at most, probably closer to a 20th of an inch tall. So, like the little one stud height things. So it doesn't make any sense. They could have saved themselves a few pieces and just had you place all four of the rigid plates that are smaller directly on the less rigid, more flexible base plate, or they could have thrown in what I would guess would be probably less than 50 extra pieces if they were just big long pieces to build up a wall, and that's exactly what they did in the chess set. So it makes a lot of sense to really just integrate one into the other. I would heavily recommend getting the chess set before you get the Ludo game, both of which are probably very out of print. And also, that was something I bought at a Lego store, and the Lego store I went to was particularly marked up. Like, the set we got was the Ludo set was sells on the Lego store, but it's sold out right now for $27. It was marked at $40 for comparison. So yeah, if you're gonna buy Lego, don't go to the Lego store. Although, in all fairness, everything else I bought in the Lego store, I'm sorry, I should jump into a game here. I'm gonna play green and try some of that. Everything else I got at the Lego store are Legoland exclusives, which are Legolands. There's about 6 around the world Legolands that are actual Disneyland-esque theme parks, but then there's a lot of other Lego stores that also have a Legoland that are more kind of half efforts. That they're fine for young kids, not particularly super entertaining for adults. I really wouldn't recommend an adult going to a store Legoland by themselves. Although you can do that, it seems now, whereas a couple of years ago they were very strict about saying no, you can't do that. You have to have a kid, and they were probably, in retrospect, doing themselves a favor. But yeah, the Legoland exclusives are not sold on Lego Store, as far as I've ever seen. So, so there is something to that to remember, to remind yourself on that point. Yeah, I don't really have a reason that I need to play that, although the odds of this having 7 mana, which is incredibly expensive, is unlikely. It's not even really worth it to play that. This is probably a card that, in retrospect, they could have tweaked. Get that down to 6 mana. Instead. Still working on my conference room sign. I'm having a problem just with manipulating the data. And this might be kind of a consistent issue, in particular for me, just having issues of writing the code in a way that looks like it should work for me, but very possibly actually getting garbage results because my code is slightly off, or because the functions that I'm using from header files interact differently than the way I would expect them to. Particularly, I'm seeming to have trouble with the substring function, and I'm trying to use some helper custom example functions of the substring function called ends with and starts with, to take the data I'm getting from the website that in particular I'm trying to program it right now to handle redirect requests from HTTP servers, and I'm getting halfway there and then getting not all the way there. Specifically checking to see if it says HTTP or HTTPS, because that changes which functions used, and then getting it to decide if it's has a colon then a number, or just a colon / / because if there's a colon number, that means that it's specifying a specific port, which means custom ports could be used, which is gonna be somewhat useful. Although, in all honesty, custom ports are mostly a thing of the past, in part done to obfuscate what's going on. If you're seeing traffic that is coming from, I can't do anything here. I mean, I could do this and just see what that happens. You could do it with one. Yep. If you're seeing a lot of traffic on port 80, that's HTTP traffic, that's website traffic. Nobody's surprised there. However, if you were, say, sending something completely different on port 80 and it wasn't HTTP traffic, it might be harder to to detect. On the other hand, if somebody is literally scanning for all traffic on port 80, but they're not looking for anything on port 81 instead, or 200 or 6,000 or 60,000, why can I not defend here? Can't block. Black can't block this turn. Or this creature can't block this turn. Alright, well. But I do want to make my code as variable as possible, particularly when you come from the perspective that you're assuming. Oh, that was a mistake. You're assuming that this is going to be in a environment where people are going to have a bunch of weird setups in their network. Man, too late now, I guess. Yeah, it's very possible that things would be set up wrong in a network environment, in an office environment. There's just too many bad IT people out there that don't know the standards or care about standards at all. That is also in part why I want to integrate a assistance header file for over-the-air updates, but I don't want to enable it because then that leaves this default setting where somebody could potentially do a man-in-the-middle attack and or hijack whatever website I would use to host the over-the-air updates, and it wouldn't really solve a solution if people specifically wanted to upload, say, their own updates or custom updates for their own place. And while it would be nice in the project if I could encode and obfuscate my code, it's not realistic for the low power hardware I'm using. Like, in the end, I think it would just be not really worth it to try and live in this paranoid fear that somebody is going to reverse engineer the code and undercut me. Like, it almost certainly would happen. I'm much more concerned about losing access to the needed hardware, and because of that, that's where things are gonna get weird. Certainly is the okay. Haste riot. Target creature can't block. Create a food token. Put that on the field. Take the action. Place that on the field. Let's see, scry options. Put that on the bottom. I don't have enough mana. Yeah, the hardware issue in two different ways. Like, one way, if this was a super successful product and like entire government agencies are ordering millions of them, which seems unrealistic, but let's just say there was something like that. At a certain point, going to a Chinese, or maybe you could go to a Taiwanese, Vietnamese shop to not do business with the Chinese, who are notorious for stealing your intellectual property, and having the hardware rebuilt onto a custom board, and not prototype boards that potentially are unnecessary or a little bit more expensive. They're certainly not cheap. A custom board probably could significantly reduce the cost in manufacturing. That certainly is a thought that you could think about, but I'm not sure it's reasonable or worth the effort, and there's still always that big if. You've got to get sales first, and large amounts of sales. Alright, so I have now 6, which if I play this and I play this, alright, and I guess we'll keep Flexing Intruder on the field, and we'll sacrifice food for health. I guess I can attack with one? Like, if I was to go the extra mile and just make a circuit board and then figure out how to solder a specific chip, a couple of specific chips onto the circuit boards, and a ink screen, yeah, there's a potential there that would work, but it certainly would be asking a lot. It's probably not worth it. Probably would be better just to take the money and run in the first few orders and sell the product as is. And at a certain point it might be even easier just to sell the entirety of the business, this theoretical business, and hand it over to somebody else who would think they could take it the next mile. But since I didn't do any hardcore programming or anything, there's really nothing more to ramble on about that. As far as super geeky things, it's definitely recognizable that pretty much every December I basically take the entire month off on vacation, and if I don't just screw up horribly, I would... Jeez, what am I looking for now? Because that alone has allowed me to scry through my cards. But if I just keep what I want, like Gift of Paradise, double the amount of mana, that's probably not a bad card. but then you're just done, 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 and done. So you can kind of see how this strategy only makes sense if you are trying for a one-turn victory using some crazy strategy. Alright, so if I do this, I won't be able to do this. Like, Wicked Wolf. Let's just scry through everything and make it look like we're actually looking for a card. We kind of would need to know what was in our deck, and that's the problem, is I really don't know what's in the deck. So could probably win if I just attacked with everything next turn. Like, they really would have a hard time defending against this, although if I messed that up, I'd also lose next turn. We still are in the Christmas season, so there's not a lot, in fact even less, I would say, as far as things to. So this guy's gonna attack, so that's not gonna work. Let's see, here, 1, 2, 3 would be 6 there. One more there would be 8. One more there would be 9. Each creature in my graveyard? How many creatures do I have in my graveyard? Probably not a bad number. Do I want yet another Season of the Growth? I don't think so. There we go. We'll keep Gift of Strength. We'll just keep Gift of Strength. So RetroArch 1.8.2 has been released. Big features are accessibility for blind people, which I think is just a expansion of the on-the-fly translation from foreign languages. You can update all your in-store cores now with a simple button press. Now, all of this is not anywhere with the old version in RetroPie and Raspberry Pi versions of RetroArch, I imagine. Manual content scanner without checking the database seems to be added. There's a lot of things. Scan inside of archives. Let's do this. Alright. I'll hold on to that. guy decided to do it. Enable automatic naming of arcade content via DAT files. Interesting. Which might make it easier. There, we got a new card. This has been probably the worst week so far as me getting victories, because it's taken until Friday to get this far. We're just waiting for this new expansion to happen. Well, green is too slow, so back to black. Apparently the new version of RetroArch is less RAM intensive, and it has much faster video playback with improved FFmpeg cores and Vulkan Android fixes and Vita improvements. So overall, looks like it's been a decent improvement in this new version. The Game Boy looking retro flag case called the GPI case has now a side mod from a different modder that is a 3D printed case and circuit board that would allow you to connect the Compute Module 3 Plus to it instead of using a Raspberry Pi Zero. The pros of that are massively better CPU power. Now, not without some penalty, inevitably to the battery life. But I haven't noticed so far a incredibly bad battery life on the GPI case. It's probably not the best it could be, but it's not terrible either. But instead of one core at like 1 gigahertz which I think is what the the Raspberry Pi Zero runs at, it's 4 cores at 1.2 gigahertz for the Compute Module 3. Plus it gives you connections and easier access, in my opinion, to the SD card, but it actually gives you USB connections you can access. The problem though is that it is bigger, so you are going to have this 3D printed thing kind of hanging cartridge. It's basically the equivalent of some of those Game Genie attachments that came with Game Boys, where it's just plastic on top of plastic, and it just turns it into a monstrosity. And it really doesn't add that much. It is about a centimeter taller, so you do see it, and it is just a different color, which is somewhat of a problem. But aesthetically, but that's really the only reason it's a problem. Arguably you're paying, like, I think the mod is like $30 with the Compute Module, maybe even more with the Compute Module, so you're getting close to paying half the price of the entire case, which the case had a screen, it was really polished. I think it probably would make a lot of sense for Retroflag to come out with their own version of this and undercut the competition. And frankly, if they just changed their design a little bit and made the entire thing a little bit bigger, you could get a Compute Module in there. It's only slightly taller. It's not really any wider. The Compute Module 4 on the other hand, and that would be another caveat, has not been announced or come out yet. They just don't announce things before they come out at all, so you also are in a position where there is a decent chance in January, February that they announce a compute module for it based on the power of the Raspberry Pi 4, and then you'd have to rebuild your software because it might not be 100% compatible, or you would end up double buying because you would want the more powerful Raspberry Pi 4, which I would argue the Raspberry Pi 4 is more powerful. And well, it is, just undeniably it's more powerful and has three different options for video RAM and RAM. There is also limitations to consider with using the Game Boy GPI case, in the fact that you really can't play a Nintendo 64 game or some PlayStation 1 games, even if you do have the actual power to do it. You don't have the you don't have the buttons, so yeah, that's definitely another concern, is that you can't without a controller, and you can't plug in a controller by default. You could with the compute module since the USB is exposed, but then you would have this Game Boy looking case that I still don't think the HDMI is exposed with the compute module board that they're offering. So so you'd be looking at a game, a Nintendo 64 game for example, at 320 by 240 resolution, which is pretty low, and you would be plugging in a controller and using an external controller with that for no real reason. I think your best bet is, I would just like them to make a Raspberry Pi Zero W, and the compute module, by the way, doesn't have wireless either. So if they made a Raspberry Pi Zero W version 2, so Raspberry Pi, I guess 0.1 W might be the best way to do that. Then if they just put more RAM and more CPU, which they have said in the past that they're having a hard time dealing with people that will give them chips that have the small amount of RAM that was in the Raspberry Pi Zero and the Raspberry Pi 3s, and so they're just having to make product refreshes just because the chipset makers have said, yeah, we're just not making things that small anymore. It's not worth our time. That they've gotten so good at making instead of 512 gigs of RAM or megs of RAM, that it's just easier to make 1 gig of RAM, which that is all in thanks of cell phones, and still a rampant amount of improvement and development in cell phone technology. So yeah, if they will eventually be forced to make a new Raspberry Pi Zero, and it'll probably be called something like Raspberry Pi Zero Plus, and then you would want the wireless version, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make a non-wireless version. And then that would be small enough and fit in the same form factor and be close to just a drop-in and drop-out replacement of the hardware for the GPI case. I'm going to have to ask all the kids that I'm related to, all the nieces and nephews and cousins and such, that whether they got any Nintendo Switches or anything for Christmas, or what they got for Christmas, because a lot of them are getting to the point where if they did get a Nintendo Switch, my retro stuff won't really cut it anymore. Like, I was trying to get in early. Guess we're gonna have to exit here. We're having potentially some network trouble with, and I imagine that is just a Magic Arena fluke more than anything else. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we were gonna have some network trouble. And I think I somewhat did succeed. Like, I got the kids to play things like Zelda and arcade games and all of that, but seriously game. And I hate how this works, and there's just like no way to block it off. So let's see let's come over here, but no, I can't do that. So oh yeah, well, I'll just mute myself in case somebody wants to run some kind of sound detection on my typing. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. It seems like maybe Magic Arena is just down for real. So let's just cover the news and call it a day, I guess. So we've got a game here on Steam called PM-1 Inverse Universe, which looks like it's an asteroid fly around space game. Yeah, another game that looks super uninteresting to me. $12.99, too expensive, English only, and black and white for no good reason. So yeah, I'll just come back here as we load anything in. I didn't even really curate the games that I was going to be talking about because I figured we would have to deal with we would be playing like 10 games and that would take about an hour anyways. We have a game here on Steam called Air Attack 3.0 Aerial Firefighting Game, which I think is trying to be a flight simulation game where you're putting out fires, which there's been a lot of those certainly around Australia and California, and I'm sure plenty of other places. $19.99 English only. Again, not anything of any polished visuals, so I'm not interested in that. TechRaptor has an article here. Black Mesa finally adds Zen levels. Roadmap to 1.0. So apparently the Zen chapters are the bad part of the game, according to TechRaptor. I don't know if I even really would ever get around to or want to play the Half-Life series in its weird way. I kind of need to see it end and wrap up a story somewhat decently, and I just don't think that's ever going to happen. And it's just so old at this point. I think a lot of things would fly over my head as far as things that the Half-Life engine could introduce or could do that other games couldn't do. Probably feel very much just like what standard games do these days. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. The Witch's House MV is a cute yet horrific. This looks like a RPG MV maker game. RPG maker game. They made a new version that is RPG Maker games that look more like Super NES RPGs instead of NES RPGs, and that's what RPG Maker MV I think is called. Next we have a game on Steam here called Ascent Free Roaming VR Experience, which it's labeled just as The Ascent here, which doesn't look like anything to me. It looks like it's a dark screenshot syndrome, stand in one place and shoot at monsters thing. This is the server edition for $999. So this seems to be something people are trying to sell on Steam to, and it's not for commercial use in Ireland or the UK apparently. Why specifically those two places and not other countries, I don't know. Yeah, it seems like it's probably something trying to sell itself as software that would be used inside of a VR event center. There's like apparently haptic feedback suits and guns and equipment that they also sell, or that it integrates with at least. But yeah, I don't think that kind of software needs to be on Steam, frankly. That seems crazy to have something where somebody could accidentally, on a commercial end user individual site, click a button and spend $1,000. That's just ridiculous. Next we have an article here from Gamatsu. Yokai Watch Jam Yokai Academy Y game is in development. So our new Yokai Watch game is in development. No huge surprise there, because of course Yokai Watch would have another game in development consistently until it stops being popular enough, like any kid's product. Gamatsu has an article here. Gunslinger Stratos game for console and PC to be announced shortly after the new year. This looks definitely like a JRPG game. Is it part of any other series? Square Enix online battle action shooting game for arcades. Interesting. So this is a um, game that was an arcade game first. Frankly, at a certain point, Square Enix owns so much of the font set and the art style that looks here and the color palette that any JRPG that looks like this is highly likely to be a Square Enix product. Whereas I feel like a lot of other JRPG developers around the world have moved on to different art styles and such. That if the Final Fantasy look is really only kind of unique to Square Enix products. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. God Eater 3 version 2.30 updates launches January 16th. Film transversing the past episodes in a new Ashrot Origami and more. So, more content for the God Eater series, not to be confused with the God Hand series or the Bloodborne Bloodstain. No, not Bloodborne or Bloodstain. Not to be confused with those either. What's the other one? Blood Vein. Yeah. Blood Vein is the game that I was mostly confusing the God Eater series with. They could have definitely used a couple of more months apart in the releases. Gamatsu has an article here. Boku Hime project launches April 23rd, 2020, and Boku, I know, is the male version of I, and I think Hime might be the female version of saying I in Japanese. So this is a guy, a masculine I, feminine I, which would make sense because this is a cross-dressing themed adventure game. So this angsty looking guy here seems to be cross-dressing, if I was to guess, and it seems like this girl here just poked him in the butt, and that's what has got him giving off that expression, this blushing expression. Yep. If it's a visual novel, it really wouldn't be too much different there. I guess there isn't a huge amount of cross-dressing visual novels out there, but probably more than you would think. Usually, I think it boils down to you'll have one character who's a side character that maybe cross-dresses, and that's it. That reminds me of Catherine, which they did add a cat in the Catherine remastered or whatever the new version of Catherine was. They did add that third character that was transgendered. I don't think an actual cross-dresser. And there is a big difference there. But being reminded of Catherine, that reminds me of Destiny Child, and they did a lot for Christmas. They expanded the summon pools for a gacha game. That's a big deal. They introduced in the global version the House of Reincarnation, which is great because that means you can take all your extra 4-star characters you don't need and you can turn them into a 5-star, or you can gamble to maybe turn them into a 5-star. It takes like 40 to guarantee you'll get a 5-star, or you could gamble and use less, and then they get turned into just new 4-stars, which isn't really useful for me since I have all the 4-stars, and 3-stars and 1-stars and 2-stars. So I'm just looking for 5-stars and then evolving the 5-stars into their 6-star version, since there are no 6-star creatures that you can get. But it also allows you to trade 6 5-stars you don't need into 1 5-star you do need if you've already gotten one of the 5-stars anyways, which then you uncap and power up the 5-stars up to plus 6. So you want 6 copies of every 6-star, level 6-star characters you have to make them their maximum strength. And that's kind of hard to do, particularly in the collaboration characters that were only available for a short time. So if I didn't get the first one copy of them, I probably am never going to get a copy of them all. I'd like to see the collaboration events come back, or they change the collaboration characters so that there's another way to get them, or they replace them with somebody else that's more canonical. Because they had like a collaboration event with what is it called? Kiyomi Friends, which is kind of more of a kids anime with anthropomorphic animal characters, and those characters that you got in that are cute and all, but they really don't merge as well with the other character styles and art styles. So if they just replaced those and turned them into non-collab characters, that would be great. The other thing you could do is, instead of translating 6 5-stars, you translate 3 max 6 stars, max level 6 stars for a 5-star, which I don't know why you would really want to do that. That seems to be an extremely late game option. You do get a bonus of a small amount to get characters all the way to their max level at the 6-star range, but it would be way easier to wait until you had 6 level 1 5-stars than it is to try and level up 3 to 6 stars. In fact, it really doesn't make any sense at all, because you would have to have evolved your 5 stars. You would have had to maximum to a max level 5-star, spent 5 other 5 stars to evolve it up to a 6-star. So it doesn't make any sense at all. It seems like a crazy idea. The only time it really made sense is that they did give some 6+ max level characters, so if they start giving out more expansions where you might end up with two of the same character at level 6 with 6+ evolutions, then you could unbind and uncap them, so that you would end up with 5 5-stars at level 1 and 1 6-star at the max level of 60. I'm talking about the game way too much. If I'm going to talk about Destiny Child this much, I should just bring up an emulator and just show it off on the stream. So, sorry for that rambling. Komatsu has an article here. Death Comes True introduces a hotel concierge, which I imagine Death Comes True is just going to be the next Japanese game that's coming out for the PC, PS4, smartphone, and Switch, that is just going to constantly trickle out bits of details and information. Here, we can see if this will work now. I suppose. It's been a while. This is not super surprising as much as you would think, but is a weird story. TechRaptor has this article. The Game Grumps are going to be in a Steam porn game for some reason. Not super surprising, because first of all, you know that the Game Grumps basically supported one of their employees to make Dream Daddy the dad dating simulator. So you already had kind of a romance joke game that had come out there, so that could have been the introduction. But also, you know that, or I know at least, that this guy who's one of the main musicians in Ninja Sex Party, a comedic music group, goes by the name of Danny Sexbang. So like they'd always had that kind of comedy. But also the Game Grumps, which is both of them combined, haven't really been super interested in playing video games at all in the past year. They've just expanded their channel and made spin-off channels and done different things, so they're just tired of making video game YouTube content. It's probably not making them as much money as they would like, and so yeah, that all kind of falls into place and makes some sense. So they're going to be in that game House Party, which I don't think they had any involvement on. And I still don't think House Party is actually a good game. It's another example of a game that is just designed to sell because streamers play it, because streamers do play weird games a lot of times. We're back into Magic now. It didn't even require me to log in. So yeah, this seems to be the path for a lot of big successful video game YouTubers, is, hey, let's make our own games, let's get inside other games, let's become voice actors, video game YouTubers in particular do not see themselves as critics, and as such that they don't see themselves as critics, they don't hold themselves to any kind of standards of not butting up and becoming cronies of video game content creators or video game developers. And video game developers are more than happy to pander. And there was a story about how Famitsu gave, I believe, Death Stranding a Game of the Year award even after the whole controversy about how the former editor-in-chief of Famitsu was put inside the game as a character, and the Death Stranding developer, I can't remember his name at the moment, basically did that with a lot of people. He was butting up and being super friendly with a significant amount of people in and out of the video game critics field. And I really can't blame Kojima, is his name, for doing that. That's like, a game developer's job is to sell their game, and any tricks they can pull to do that is fine. We unfortunately have ascribed no ethics to people who run businesses, but we do ascribe, generally speaking, ethics to people who are reporters and journalists. So I do expect a journalist, I hold them to a higher standard than the no standard of games developers. And yeah, as far as the game goes, at this point, after spending probably a year, maybe a little less than a year, trying to watch the Game Grumps, I don't think that there's any specific content that they've made that was actually informative or educational or helpful in any way. And for Christmas in particular, they were playing a cheap, low-effort visual novel called, well, I think they were playing Sakura Santa and Adolescent Santa, so 2 different games, both cheap, low-effort products that were adult games, one of which they definitely had to censor. If anything, that's kind of good news, though, that well, I imagine the Game Grumps would get a pass from YouTube anyways, but it's kind of good news to see that the Game Grumps can put adult games on YouTube and make a big joke of it, and as long as they're just censoring things and not saying anything too explicit. Let's see. But yeah, they definitely seem like they're going in that direction, and I probably don't need to go follow them. If anything, I would say probably in at least the last 3 weeks, I want to watch this later, watch later list on YouTube has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and I have not even gone back to the list to check it. So my interests have shifted towards more just listening to radio stations that are being uploaded to YouTube and that have nothing to do with video games, and more just pop comedy things. This 5 guy is gonna just keep on attacking me. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article here. Get a job, Moon Studios is hiring a remote senior games designer. I think we already talked about this. This is, yeah, we did. So, yeah, being just 2 days after Christmas and being a Friday is really the perfect combination of why there would be no new news. Gamasutra has this blog that actually was written 6/10/2019, called Level Design Patterns in 2D Gaming, which might be interesting if you're trying to make a 2D platformer. You can see, if I scroll back up here, they're talking here Super Mario World, Super Mario Brothers, I don't know if this is one, Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, I believe. Don't recognize this, and this is Mega Man. So there is some patterns and some subtitles here. Gamasutra doesn't usually have links to further down in the page, which usually their articles are so short that wouldn't make any sense anyways. But I would say if you're a game developer making a 2D platforming game, there is a lot to be learned from the old games, instead of screwing up and giving me what it seems like happens in a lot of modern games that are platformers, where it's nothing, or it's selling itself on the fact that it's frustrating. And I would argue a lot of Mega Man platforming is not that good either. And honestly, I'm probably not personally a huge fan of platformers in anyways, but a lot of them are just just bad design for no reason. Do I want to sacrifice a creature? Yes. If I can get this on the field, I guess. And then no attacks. Well, actually, I think I'm gonna lose. Yep, he's just gonna take me out there. Yeah, we may have like 2 more games and that's it. And I'm not even sure my guesstimations are quite right there. Might be just 1 more game. Next we have a game on Steam here called Fungi, which looks kind of like an agg.io game. Maybe there's slightly more of a visual polish on this, but it still looks pretty annoying. $4.79, English only. Yeah, it's pretty much not worth saying anything more about it. Yeah, if there a game where you played as a fungus, I think would have to have kind of a huge backstory behind it. You'd have to be the fungus from like The Last of Us, infecting people's brains and turning them into monsters type game. Something that could make it more interesting to do something very simplistic and generic. Next we have a game on Steam called Ocean Drive Challenge Remastered, which looks like it is just a Overdrive clone. And it kind of has a flat 2D animation look to it, but then it looks like the actual gameplay probably runs a little too fast for most people to be able to control it without crashing. It's an Outrun clone, and Outrun in itself is not a super interesting game, particularly when you're not playing it in an arcade with a actual driving wheel. I think that's when something like this becomes slightly fun. Doesn't look like it has split pass, and Outrun actually does have split pass if you get that far. It does look like it might have some interesting story that you see in the rearview mirror every now and then, and maybe some characters that they're trying to add, but that's kind of it. And the graphics look like a Mode 7 Super NES game, and that's not really what you want. I'd like it to be smoother. This is $5.09, English only. And, yeah, I wouldn't call it a low effort game, just not quite hitting the mark to catch my interest, and I'm not sure there would be a great way to catch my interest here. Next we have a game called Aloe and Cal, which looks like a furry game. And at a certain point, is there any way you don't just describe this as a furry game? I think 2020 is around the corner. I think at this point you just are loud and proud about furry games. I don't think you could call this in the form of a goofy animation, or it's a cartoon or Looney Tune or Disney cartoon style animation. This, I think, is straight up just a furry visual novel. It's $17.99. It's way too expensive. It says it has 40 plus hours of story. I imagine no adult content according to its description. Yep. And there are definitely, I think, a lot of people who are into furry things that are younger and don't really want the adult content. So I think the community is probably, or that community is particularly splitting into 2 separate communities. Moving on, we have a game here called Math Path, which looks like a low effort joke troll game. It's from this WTB publisher who clearly looks like a troll. Let's see. Yeah. Hacked Hentai Prison, Love Hentai, WTB. Yep. A lot of low effort garbage troll games here. So here's the thing. If these are in chronological order, this guy has been selling games since 2015. Pooh Sky should have been a red flag. The Pskov story should have been a red flag. Lost Anime Boy Saving Loli should have been a red flag. There's more than enough red flags in the first couple of years of his career of putting low effort troll games. Here's one called Babies on Fire 99 Virgins. How has this been allowed to stay on Steam? Like, are you telling me nobody ever bothers to flag any of these games? Let's see. Well, part of the problem is the flag system, clearly, because like if I click this, harmful, fraud, like at best I could click this for fraud and that's about it. There's no real option to go just garbage, just a bad game, not worthy of being on Steam. And really, yeah, I think my idea of the Quality Council works well with their libertarian idea. It's just, if you don't want to be the curator of quality, fine, just let the customers be the curator of quality. Give 1 million Steam users the ability to look at games through their discovery queue and just flag it if it looks like it's bad quality. And then you look at it and go, you know what, this is bad quality. This is not something that needs to be on the storefront, wasting people's time. It is basically an argument for deplatforming some games. It is literally taking some game developers and some games off the platform of Steam. But a lot of these bad games aren't things that I wouldn't mind existing. Like, I've never really seen a game that was just so offensive and so bad that I would say it shouldn't exist in the world at all. I just don't think it should be on a storefront, and particularly the foremost storefront of Steam. It should be on itch.io or free on your own website. It shouldn't be available to be on sale amongst the likes of The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077 and Skyrim. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Road Homeward World, Open World, which looks like it's probably a low effort Chinese game if I was to guess. English is not supported, $17.99. Russian, not Chinese game. I guessed wrong there. I guess it is a little bit more militaristic, so that would be probably Russian. Like, the Chinese don't revel in showing their military equipment and their military in general. They revel more in showing traditional Chinese proverbs and things like that. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. Digimon News Navigation livestream is set for January 24th, 2020, which, yeah, I imagine there will be a new announcement for Digimon Survive here. It's coming out in PC worldwide in 2020. I also wouldn't be surprised if they announced like a new Digimon anime or a new Digimon, but they probably wouldn't even have that announcement at the same announcement of the game, because the anime would be the much higher focus. I wouldn't be surprised though if they also announced a second game starting development even before they released the first game. Next, we have a game on Steam called Tiles Shooter Puzzle Cube, which even if that is an accurate description of what this is, which it doesn't look like it is, it looks like what this is a 4-dimension you get to pick Tetris game, which does seem like that would be a slightly interesting idea. Although, since you're seeing the sides anyways, that effectively just means you're rotating a cube like a Rubik's Cube, but with some slight different interactions. This, as a concept, is a little bit intriguing, but visually is not polished enough to look interesting. It's 99 cents, and it's English, German, Spain, Spanish, and Russian. This is one of those games I'm not going to put on the fall list, but I would like to see perhaps somebody else take this concept and do something more with it. Put some more visual polish on it. Put some characters in it. Put some story in it. As much as you can. Next we have a game on Steam here called Hollow Sprint, which seems like, unless she's using wristbands to see her indication, it seems like it's some kind of, it's using a webcam to look at our hands. Well, first of all, you probably still would want a steering wheel, or at least a steering wheel cover, which would be easier for you to buy in a general Walmart store, so you just have something round in your hands. And then I'm not sure if you were holding a steering wheel cover, would the detection actually work? I'm not sure the detection really would work anyways. It's still a problem though, because you do a lot more when you're driving normally than just steer a steering wheel. There's no indication here that it can see your feet, so no acceleration, deceleration, no indication of it being able to see if you shifted, so automatic is assumed. Seems like this game would have to run incredibly slowly. I just don't know what you'd be doing with this. It seems like you'd just be experimenting with something for no reason, when it would probably cost you nearly the same amount of money to buy a controller, a cheap used controller, than it would to be buying a webcam. And I wouldn't want a webcam looking at me ever, frankly. But so the whole idea seems ridiculous as a tech demo, yet they're selling it for $1.99. And let's see, it's English only. It needs to see your head, shoulders, and hands. Hold your hands above your nose level to drive in reverse. Yep. I don't think there's anything there. And we're just constantly having trouble here with Magic Arena. Really didn't have this kind of trouble with Hearthstone, I have to admit. Let's see. Moving on. Let's just wrap up here. Gematsu has a smartphone game here called Wararu Ars Notaria. Teaser trailer and countdown launch has been announced. Smartphone game is due out in the spring of 2020 in Japan. Looks like it's a bunch of witches that maybe control some powerful male characters in the background, from what I can tell. We'll see if we run into anything YouTube objectionable just looking at the trailers. Yeah, that they're just barely showing the guys, so they're teasing them. So it might be a guy gotcha game where you're collecting different husbandos for people into that. Next we have a game on Steam called Nasty Rogue, which looks like another Minecraft clone. Although this video does show a lot more action, so I kind of appreciate that, but I hate the graphics though. If this looked not like a Minecraft game and I saw this gameplay, I'd be like, oh, so this is a high action adventure game, hack and slash game? I'd be much more interested in that. But the way it looks turns me off immediately. It's $10.79. It's English and French. I don't even know why you would specifically want to have a action focused game look like Minecraft anyways, because Minecraft is definitely not known for being high action or good action. I mean, fighting the creepers can be fun, but it's not your go-to choice for action games. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article, the Xenosaga collection progressed to the remasters plan, but failed in a profitability market analysis. Katsura Harada confirms a collection is not in the works. So basically what he's saying is that Bandai Namco thought about doing it, but then they shut it down, saying it wouldn't make enough money. I don't know if I agree with that, but I can't really argue against it either. Like I know the Xenosaga series is somewhat well known and somewhat beloved, but it's hardly like, at least in the Western world, that there's a ton of people that are chomping at the bit to play a Xenosaga remaster release. I don't even see a lot of speedrunners play Xenosaga games, which probably means it's a super long RPG series, and remasters of that would be hard to do. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. The Idolmaster console game announcement is set for January 20th, 2020. So you can see how the Japanese developers in particular are working towards their next announcements. Christmas is not a big deal, nor is it even really a time, I think, where a lot of their their fiscal years end. So getting some more announcements in before, I imagine their fiscal years probably end in like March, makes some sense. But yeah, we'll start seeing more announcements, and then those announcements, particularly from Japanese companies, will just get announced with a little bit more details, and then announced again with a little bit more details, and I'll try to filter out the redundant announcements as much as possible. Next we have a game on Steam called League of Pixels, which looks like a 2D action platforming game. It's not interesting enough. It looks like it's almost more player versus player design than something super interesting. It's early access, free to play. Yeah, single player with online VP, player versus player. Yep. A little too much Terraria, although that wouldn't be too bad. Now that wind sign does look pretty awful, though. Here's an article they tweeted out from Apple Viz, which is a blind and low vision users of Apple products and related applications. They wrote an article about RetroArch 1.8.2, making games more accessible. This is for iOS and the Apple TV build that they have, which I imagine you have to jailbreak to install. Tech Raptor has an article here. The anime digital board game 100% Orange Juice hits 1 million downloads and offers a free character. That really does go to put out a point that there is just enough relevancy here. I've been seeing 100% Orange Juice as a Mario Party equivalent game available on Steam for quite a while, and I've been putting it off. And if it's got 1 million downloads, if it's giving a new character because of that, it's time to put this in the follow list and put it at a high list. Of course, unless somebody wants to gift it to me, which that would be nice. It's also exclusively on PC with 1 million downloads, which is saying quite a lot, actually. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Ku and You, which looks like it's just a low effort puzzle game. 79 cents, bunch of languages. And I've been seeing a lot of games that claim to support a bunch of languages lately. We've been seeing quite a lot of low effort games that are really English only. And yeah, I'm not really going to play Magic more today, so just going to lose out on those victories that I could get, particularly if it's going to give me all this kind of network trouble. Next we have a game here called the Winter Steel Frosty Edition, which looks like just a RPG Maker game. No real interest, although I would say the fact that you're using RPG Maker does make the graphics look fairly nice, and these are probably pre-bought assets and they look fairly nice. $3.74, English only. It does get... RPG Maker probably does empower a few people to tell the story they want to tell in a format that they probably shouldn't be using to tell that story. Because if they do have any kind of actual good story writing ability, they probably should just write a story, a short story or something like that, instead of trying to wrap it into an RPG Maker game, which is just going to add a ton of grinding and fighting. And none of those fight sequences are interesting. And I think very few people that make RPGs, relatively speaking, even understand the concept of why RPG games should be made in the first place. It's about allowing the player to role play, and even AAA developers of RPG games kind of rarely allow that to happen. So there is a lack of understanding of what RPGs should be in the first place. And that's why you have a lot of spin-off games that just have RPG elements. Speaking here of games that are Chinese and love to tell Chinese tales, here we have Tales of Gallant Jiraiya, and this clearly looks like a reference for the Flying Monkey King and Nimbus and all that story. Otherwise, this looks like it's just a kind of badly animated, or at least using a unique animation style, visual novel with real-world images in the background, which screams the Chinese RPG. $10.49, English and French. That makes no sense at all. I would still fairly assume this is a Chinese product that's just not selling with Chinese language support. Let's get something else loaded up here. Here we have a game on Steam called Foxfall, which looks very busy visually. A lot of flashing fire things. It looks like it's a small arena-based shooter, platforming game, Smash Brothers kind of clone. Looks very uninteresting. $9.99 English only. We have about 5 more games. Next we have Dance Arrow Beat Smash, which is clearly just a Beat Saber clone. Just straight up, I think at this point, if Beat Saber can copyright its concept, this is a clear violation of that copyright. Early access $17.49. English only. Yeah. Just a complete ripoff of Beat Saber. Next, we have a game on Steam called My Name Is You, and it's the only unusual thing in my life. It looks to me like this is a visual novel that is 100% text. It's free to play, so I guess the price is right, but it's English and Russian, and it's probably, if I was to guess, a troll game or extremely low effort game. But even in calling it a low effort game, it is fair to say that they spent more effort putting the text on screen by polishing it up and putting some graphics and some fuzziness on it to create some atmosphere than some of the other text only games I've seen on Steam, where they literally just put text on a white page. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. Zerlane Crosswave DLC characters Lee Malin and Sirius announced. So Crosswave isn't out already, but they're already confirming that they will have DLC characters. So imagine these are the two. Quick reminder of what Zerlane is. It's the PC version of a mobile game. Each of these anime girls represent a naval battleship, and they fight each other, or they're fighting against enemies based on an anime. I tried to play the mobile game, but the actual gameplay mechanic in it wasn't automated enough, and it was boring. It is a gacha game, much like Destiny Child, but it does have that mushy middle feeling for me, in which Destiny Child, particularly if you install the uncensored patch, which I reinstalled, you have to reinstall it after every patch. I've been living without it for a couple months. Destiny Child is particularly lewd, whereas Azure Lane only has some implied nudity and is more a teen plus, or maybe even 17 plus type game, where Destiny Child is probably a mature only audience, only 18 plus type game. And Destiny Child automates all its gameplay mechanics, so you don't have to press a bunch of buttons, whereas Azure Lane, you have to actually play or press a bunch of buttons. Even if you try to automate it, it does automate a little bit, but it's on a per instance basis, so you have to hit a button to start every instance, which only occurs when you're trying to do friend battles in Destiny Child, which I wish that was automated too. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Colossals, which looks like it is a visual novel / RPG maker style game. Well, they're calling it a visual novel, but it does kind of feel like it has more RPG elements than you normally would have in a visual novel. $4.24, and English only. Still not really interested in it. I don't know what the closest comparison would be, but Pokemon Go might be a somewhat close comparison. If you're playing any Pokemon game, whether it's Pokemon Go or otherwise, and you're trying to collect them all, that's basically a gacha game. Although most gacha games are extremely expensive, or can be if you actually buy the things that you're often forced to buy. So yeah, while the Azure Lane games I would say be probably teen plus, there's nothing super for young kids, which is probably for the better. There's better things you can do with your time, particularly if you're energetic and actually wanting to play games instead of just wanting them to run and run themselves. Next, we have a game here on Steam called Builder VR, which looks like a VR building simulation that doesn't really have any purpose. It's like, would you like to build things kind of with Legos in VR and then not be able to really manipulate or play with them? I think the answer is probably no. This is $3.99, which is incredibly cheap for a VR game, and it's English only. I'm still going to Epic every day, getting their new game of the day, as long as they're giving out games. Today is FTL, which I already own and play FTL, but heck, getting it for free on a second storefront is not a terrible idea. So then that brings me to the Humble Bundle store, which, let's see, there's one bundle that ends in 3 days, there's one bundle that ends in 1 day. And I seriously doubt there will be any new bundles. A Holiday Makecation is a new bundle, but it's a books bundle. Yeah, I don't think there'll be a new game bundle. Let's see, and I think at that point I could just look at my new tweets and see what new tweets have happened, because I think there will be pretty much nothing. One of the YouTube Twitter accounts asked YouTubers if they got new equipment to stream with, which is definitely kind of pandering towards Abe pushing more content creators to spend more money, when frankly they should not be doing that, considering how YouTube is almost certainly going to have another adpocalypse in January or February, unless they've actually done something to plan for it and not and fight against it. You know that mainstream content creators are going to try to create another adpocalypse, or the people buying the ads are going to try to renegotiate one way or another. And it seems like every couple months YouTube changes the rules on how you can make money or how much money you can make, so it's really just going to get consistently worse and worse. An idea to try to be a YouTuber or try to buy more equipment to be a YouTuber. This is not the time to invest in equipment if you can avoid it, particularly since there's no real competition there with any other sites. The only new tweet really worth mentioning is this Open Critic article. The stoner noir game about a koala detective is raising funds to save real koalas, which I think is too little too late at this point, because last I heard, at least one species, if not basically all koalas, are effectively extinct. And the reason is because Australia is on fire with their government denying global climate change and not really funding or paying a lot of the volunteer firemen to put out the fires. They're not paying any of them, so yeah, the fires, I think, destroyed their habitat. Now the good news is, in modern time, while they are effectively extinct, I think we could probably still keep a few in zoos until their genetics just become too mixed and you can breed inside the zoos and try and reintroduce them into a population if there is a environment that they could survive in. I think koalas only live in Australia, so like, I would definitely recommend people investigate whether giving to the World Wildlife Fund actually would help koalas, and if anything can help koalas, because last I heard that they're just doomed. And maybe a lot of things are doomed. So that would be a depressive argument to get to. Which also the stream has been kind of depressive, as at the very least, with Magic just not wanting to work, like network troubles again, probably because of the holidays, but a pain in the butt regardless. That's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me even further, you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist, or gift me a gift card, or you can support me through Patreon. Remember, the Steam Christmas sale is still going on, I think until January 2nd. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.